Working with cloth-sheathed non-metallic cable, often found in older homes, requires special care due to its fragile nature. Here are some best practices to ensure safety and proper connections. Firstly, safety precautions are paramount. Always inspect the wiring thoroughly before handling. Wear rubber gloves and eye protection to protect yourself from potential hazards. Exercise caution to avoid damaging the fragile insulation, which can easily crumble. Before starting any work, use a non-contact voltage tester to verify the power is off. Secondly, when joining conductors, it's best to avoid using pressure connectors directly on the individual conductors due to the risk of damaging the insulation. Instead, use wire nuts in combination with heat shrink tubing to create a secure and insulated connection. The process involves stripping the conductors back and twisting them together securely. Apply a wire nut and tighten it firmly with pliers to ensure a solid mechanical connection. Then slide heat shrink tubing over the wire nut and the exposed conductors. Use a heat gun to shrink the tubing, creating a sealed and insulated connection that provides additional protection. Thirdly, when entering junction boxes, there are a couple of methods to consider. One option is the heat shrink sheathing method. This involves carefully removing the cloth sheath from the cable for a few inches to expose the individual conductors. Then slide heat shrink tubing over the exposed conductors and the remaining sheath. Apply heat to the tubing to shrink it, sealing the exposed area and providing insulation. Connect the conductors inside the junction box using the wire nut and heat shrink method described earlier. Another option is the fiber cap method. Install a fiber cap, which can be found at electrical supply stores, on the end of the cable. This cap serves to protect the conductor insulation and create a clean, tapered surface for entering the junction box. The fiber cap also helps to prevent the cable from chafing against the edge of the box. Additional tips to keep in mind include mounting junction boxes securely to studs or joists to prevent them from moving or straining the connections. Use plastic spacers inside the boxes to keep the wires separated and prevent them from coming into contact with each other. Protect splices and connections with electrical tape or wire nuts to provide insulation and prevent shorts. Mark the circuits and polarity of the wires for future reference, which can be helpful when troubleshooting or making future modifications. Consider using ground fault circuit interrupter or GFCI outlets or circuit breakers for added safety, especially in areas prone to moisture. Finally, if you have any doubts or concerns about working with cloth-sheathed non-metallic wiring, it's always best to hire a qualified electrician. Working with electricity can be dangerous, and a professional electrician has the knowledge and experience to ensure that the work is done safely and correctly. Consider the age of the wiring. Older cloth wiring might be brittle and the insulation may be deteriorating. Minimizing disturbance is key. Try to avoid bending or twisting the wires excessively, as this can further damage the insulation. If possible, support the wires while working on them to prevent them from straining or breaking. When removing the outer cloth sheathing, use a sharp utility knife or wire strippers carefully to avoid nicking the insulation on the individual conductors. If you do accidentally nick the insulation, wrap it with electrical tape to provide protection. When working in tight spaces, use a flashlight or headlamp to improve visibility and avoid accidentally damaging the wiring. Before making any connections, double-check that the power is off to the circuit you are working on. Use a non-contact voltage tester to confirm that there is no voltage present. If you are unsure about anything, consult a qualified electrician. There are different types of wire nuts available, so choose the appropriate size for the number and gauge of wires you are connecting. When using heat shrink tubing, be sure to select the correct size for the application. The tubing should fit snugly over the connection, but not be so tight that it is difficult to slide on. When heating the heat shrink tubing, use a heat gun and apply heat evenly around the tubing until it shrinks and conforms to the shape of the connection. Avoid overheating the tubing, as this can damage it. After completing the wiring, inspect all connections carefully to ensure that they are secure and properly insulated. Turn the power back on and test the circuit to verify that it is working correctly. If you notice any problems such as flickering lights or tripped circuit breakers, turn the power off immediately and investigate the cause. It's essential to understand the limitations of cloth-sheathed wiring. It was commonly used in older homes and may not meet the current electrical codes. If you are planning to renovate or add to your home's electrical system, it may be necessary to replace the cloth-sheathed wiring with modern wiring. This can be a complex and expensive project, but it is important to ensure the safety and reliability of your electrical system. Also keep in mind that the presence of cloth-sheathed wiring may be an indication of other electrical issues in your home. It's a good idea to have a qualified electrician inspect your entire electrical system to identify any potential problems. Some insurance companies may require that cloth-sheathed wiring be replaced before they will provide coverage. Check with your insurance company to see if they have any specific requirements. When working with electrical wiring, always follow the National Electrical Code, or NEC, and any local electrical codes. These codes provide detailed requirements for electrical installations and are designed to ensure safety. It is important to stay informed about the latest code requirements. If you are not familiar with the NEC or local electrical codes, consult a qualified electrician. Remember that electricity can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and others. When in doubt, always consult a qualified electrician. Working with cloth-sheathed NM wiring can be challenging, but by following these best practices, you can ensure safe and reliable electrical connections. To summarize, firstly, prioritize safety with thorough inspections, personal protective equipment, and voltage testing. Secondly, use wire nuts and heat shrink tubing for secure and insulated conductor connections. Thirdly, employ heat shrink sheathing or fiber caps for safe entry into junction boxes. Fourthly, secure junction boxes, separate wires with spacers, and protect connections with tape or wire nuts. Fifthly, clearly mark circuits and polarity for future reference. Sixthly, consider GFCI outlets or circuit breakers for enhanced safety. Seventhly, consult a qualified electrician for any doubts or concerns. Eighthly, handle wires gently to avoid damaging brittle insulation. Ninthly, carefully remove sheathing and insulate any nicks in the insulation. Tenthly, use appropriate tools and lighting for tight spaces. 11thly, double-check power is off before making any connections. 12thly, select the correct size and type of wire nuts and heat shrink tubing. 13thly, apply heat evenly when shrinking tubing, avoiding overheating. 14thly, inspect all connections thoroughly after wiring is complete. 15thly, test the circuit after turning the power back on. 16thly, recognize the limitations of cloth-sheathed wiring and consider replacement during renovations. 17thly, have a qualified electrician inspect the entire electrical system. 18thly, check with your insurance company for any requirements regarding cloth-sheathed wiring. 19thly, adhere to the NEC and local electrical codes. 20thly, always prioritize safety and consult a qualified electrician when in doubt. By following these guidelines, working with cloth-sheathed NM wiring can be approached with confidence and safety. When replacing sections of cloth-sheathed wiring, consider using arc fault circuit interrupters or arc fault circuit breakers, or ASIs, in addition to GFCIs. ASIs are designed to detect electrical arcs, which can be a common cause of fires in older wiring systems. They can provide an extra layer of protection against electrical fires. When making connections in junction boxes, ensure that the box is properly grounded. Grounding helps to protect against electrical shock and can also help to prevent electrical fires. Use a grounding screw or clip to connect the grounding conductor to the metal box. If the junction box is made of plastic, it may not need to be grounded. However, it is always a good idea to consult with a qualified electrician to determine the best grounding method for your specific situation. When running new wiring, avoid running it through areas where it is likely to be damaged, such as attics or basements. If you must run wiring through these areas, protect it with conduit or other protective materials. Avoid running wiring across doorways or other high-traffic areas where it could be stepped on or damaged. When drilling holes for wiring, be careful not to drill through any existing wiring or plumbing. Use a stud finder to locate studs and joists before drilling. If you are unsure about anything, consult a qualified electrician. If you find any evidence of rodents or insects in your wiring, take steps to eliminate the pests. Rodents and insects can damage wiring and create a fire hazard. Seal any holes or cracks in your home's foundation or walls to prevent pests from entering. Consider using tamper-resistant receptacles, or TRRs, especially in homes with young children. TRR have shutters that prevent children from inserting objects into the receptacle. They can help to prevent electrical shock and injury. When replacing receptacles, use self-grounding receptacles if possible. Self-grounding receptacles have a metal clip that grounds the receptacle to the metal box. They can help to ensure proper grounding and prevent electrical shock. When making connections to receptacles, use the correct type of wire connectors. Avoid using twist-on wire connectors on solid wire, as they can loosen over time. Use push-in wire connectors or screw terminals instead. When replacing light fixtures, be sure to turn off the power to the circuit before disconnecting the old fixture. Use a voltage tester to confirm that the power is off. Disconnect the wires from the old fixture and connect them to the new fixture, following the manufacturer's instructions. Be sure to ground the new fixture properly. When installing new light switches, use a switch that is rated for the appropriate voltage and amperage. Use the switch that is designed for the type of lighting you are using, such as incandescent, fluorescent, or LED. Be sure to ground the switch properly. When working with electrical wiring, it is important to be aware of the potential hazards. Electrical shock can be fatal. Always take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and others. If you are not comfortable working with electrical wiring, consult a qualified electrician. Also, consider the wire gauge. Older cloth-sheathed wiring may use different wire gauges than modern wiring. When replacing sections of wiring, ensure that the new wiring is the same gauge as the old wiring. Using the wrong gauge of wire can create a fire hazard. The American wire gauge, or AUG, system is used to measure wire thickness. Smaller numbers indicate thicker wires. For example, 12 AWG wire is thicker than 14 AWG wire. The appropriate wire gauge depends on the amperage of the circuit. Higher amperage circuits require thicker wires. Consult the NEC or a qualified electrician to determine the appropriate wire gauge for your specific application. Also, consider the type of insulation. Modern wiring uses thermoplastic high heat resistant nylon coated, or THHN, or thermoplastic heat resistant, or THW, insulation. Older cloth-sheathed wiring may use different types of insulation. When replacing sections of wiring, ensure that the new wiring has the same type of insulation as the old wiring. Using the wrong type of insulation can create a fire hazard. THHN insulation is rated for 90 degrees Celsius in dry locations and 75 degrees Celsius in wet locations. THW insulation is rated for 75 degrees Celsius in both dry and wet locations. Also, be mindful of the color coding. Modern wiring uses color coding to identify the different conductors. Black wires are typically used for hot conductors, white wires are used for neutral conductors, and green wires are used for grounding conductors. Older cloth-sheathed wiring may not use color coding. When replacing sections of wiring, use colored electrical tape to identify the different conductors. This can help to prevent confusion and ensure that the wiring is connected properly. Also, be sure that you use the correct voltage. Most homes use 120 volts alternating current or 120 volts alternating current. However, some appliances, such as electric ranges and dryers, may use 240 volts alternating current. When replacing wiring or receptacles, ensure that you are using the correct voltage. Using the wrong voltage can damage appliances or create a fire hazard. When working with 240 volts alternating current, be extra careful, as the voltage is higher and the risk of electrical shock is greater. Always turn off the power to the circuit before working on it. Consult a qualified electrician if you are not comfortable working with 240 volts alternating current. Remember to document your work. Keep a record of all the wiring changes you make, including the date, the location, and the type of wiring used. This can be helpful for future reference and can also be useful if you ever need to sell your home. You can use a notebook, a computer file, or a dedicated electrical wiring app to keep track of your wiring changes. Be sure to include a diagram of the wiring layout. Also, remember permits and inspections. In many areas, you are required to obtain a permit before making any electrical wiring changes. You may also be required to have the work inspected by a qualified electrical inspector. Check with your local building department to determine the permit and inspection requirements in your area. Obtaining a permit and having the work inspected can help to ensure that the wiring is done safely and correctly. If you are planning to do any major electrical work, such as adding a new circuit or replacing an electrical panel, it is always best to consult with a qualified electrician. A qualified electrician can help you to plan the work, obtain the necessary permits, and ensure that the work is done safely and correctly. Hiring a qualified electrician can be more expensive than doing the work yourself, but it can save you time, money, and headaches in the long run. In summary, when dealing with cloth-sheathed wiring, remember safety first, use proper connection techniques, know the limitations of the wiring, and when in doubt, consult a qualified electrician.